Under the blazing Florida sun, deep in the heart of the Everglades, park rangers watched the first hair-shaped prototype emerge from the dense sawgrass. At first glance, it looked like any other robotic wildlife decoy. Sleek white plastic molded into rabbit ears, motion sensors twinkling like mechanical eyes. But this was no ordinary animal mimic. In a bold and unprecedented move to control invasive Burmese pythons, officials had unleashed dozens of these robo-rabbits into the swamp, programmed to emit heat and movement signatures that would lure hungry pythons into lethal traps. It was a daring experiment, born of desperation. The giant constrictors had multiplied unchecked since the 1980s, decimating native mammals, birds, and even alligators. Traditional removal methods, snaring, traps, specially trained detection dogs, had barely slowed the snake tide. Now, technology would take the lead in an ecological battle that many believed impossible to win. 6 months before the robotic rabbit's debut, biologists in Naples had logged more than 100 python sightings in a single day. One team discovered a mother snake, 3 feet thick and 20 feet long, digesting an American cooter turtle the size of a dinner plate. A separate crew found a litter of hatchlings beside the carcass of an endangered marsh rabbit. The scale of predation was staggering and spurred intense media coverage. Nightly news segments warned park visitors to stay vigilant, while wildlife magazines published gruesome photos of decapitated deer. At public forums, frustrated residents demanded action. Florida's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, facing mounting pressure, convened an emergency summit. Mechanical engineers, herpetologists, and drone pilots gathered around whiteboards, sketching solutions that range from tracked drones with snake-detecting radar to automated traps baited with synthetic pheromones. The notion of robotic rabbits, already tested successfully in small greenhouse trials to lure Burmese pythons held in captivity, rose to the top as the most promising compromise between efficiency and ecological sensitivity. By February, prototype development was complete. Each roborabbit stood roughly 2 feet tall and weighed under 10 pounds, yet housed infrared heat generators, movable limbs, and an onboard scent diffuser designed to replicate rabbit pheromones. Under cover of darkness, technicians deployed 50 units along known python feeding trails, focusing on corridors near small mammal nesting sites. Engineers watched live data feeds from GPS transmitters embedded in the devices, tracking their movement and temperature profiles. At the first sign of a python approaching, motion sensors triggered a high-pitched vibration in the limbs, simulating a rabbit's panicked thrash, and would then guide the snake toward an automated snare net concealed just yards away. In the early hours of deployment, the Everglades fell eerily silent. Marsh crickets chirped, frogs croaked, but no one saw the first strike. Park rangers and biologists waited anxiously, huddled around tablets retracing sensor logs in real time. Then, just before dawn, the feed flickered to life. A 15-foot python slithered into view, drawn by the heat signature of the decoy. Its muscular coils tightened around the base of the robo-rabbit, but rather than consume it, the snake's curiosity directed it, like steel through a magnet's pull, straight into the net. 3 minutes later, a signal flashed, engaged. Within 10 minutes, a ranger arrived, tranquilizer gun at the ready, and subdued the constrictor for removal. Cheers cracked through the team's line-of-sight radios, and high fives echoed across the swamp. Encouraged by that early success, technicians expanded the trial. Over the next 2 weeks, more than a dozen pythons, ranging from 10 to 18 feet long, were captured using the robotic decoys. Word of the breakthrough spread through wildlife circles like wildfire. News outlets splashed photos of snakes entangled around plastic bunnies, with headlines proclaiming, "High-tech hairs hop to the rescue." Social media lit up with incredulous comments, "Sci-fi swamp," and "Take that, snake." Yet not everyone celebrated. Conservation advocates worried about unintended consequences. Could the plastic rabbits attract native predators and disrupt feeding behaviors? Might the scent diffusers confuse other mammals? Some environmentalists argued that introducing more artificial stimuli into the fragile Everglades was trading one imbalance for another. Amid the clamor, state legislators convened, debating funding for a full-scale rollout. Opponents cited costs, Each robo-rabbit carried a price tag north of $5,000 and questioned whether the program could scale beyond isolated test sites. Proponents countered with data showing a 300% increase in python captures compared to traditional methods. With each python removed, native species had a chance to rebound. Pilot studies of marsh rabbit and bobcat populations in treated zones already hinted at tentative recovery. The stage was set for a showdown between innovation and caution, stakes measured in dollars, ecology, and Florida's very identity as the Everglades fights to reclaim its ancient balance. Buoyed by the early successes, state lawmakers in Tallahassee fast-tracked a bill to allocate $5 million for a full-scale deployment of roborabbits across the most infested Everglades zones. The debate was fierce. At the Capitol hearing, wildlife biologist Dr. Marisol Vega presented data showing a 60% decline in python sightings within treated test zones, proof that the decoys could tip the predator-prey balance back toward native species. But environmental watchdog groups warned that bolting forward without broader studies risked collateral damage. They cited a recent incident in which a juvenile raccoon, drawn by the scent diffuser, became inadvertently trapped and required rescue. "We need to fine-tune the pheromone profile so it targets pythons exclusively," Vega conceded, promising to refine the scent algorithms within 90 days. With legislative approval secured, Florida's Fish and Wildlife Commission ordered 2,000 new roborabbits. This batch upgraded with solar recharging panels and amphibious wheels to handle flooded marshes. Engineers from the University of Miami built a centralized control station, nicknamed the Warren, where GPS, motion data, and camera feeds coalesced into real-time heat maps of python activity. Park rangers were outfitted with tablets linked to the Warren, allowing them to redirect roborabbits remotely, shifting lures from one food corridor to another as snake migration patterns cycled. By June, more than 500 decoys were actively roaming in 3 core zones totaling 600 square miles. At Fakahatchee Strand Preserve, veteran ranger Miguel Santos led daily retrievals of netted snakes. "I've been on this job for 15 years and never seen anything work this fast," he marveled as he loaded an 11-foot female python into a transport crate. Santos noted that the new decoys spared native small mammals. He found empty burrows and chew marks on fresh grass instead of clawed-open nests. "Our marsh rabbits are bouncing back," he reported, pointing to footprints near a decoy that corroborated the rebound. Yet he also flagged a troubling trend. One decoy had vanished, last pinging its location deep in thick mangrove, raising concerns of device theft or submersion below murky floodwaters. Down south in Big Cypress, a research team led by herpetologist Dr. Carl Nguyen monitored egg-laying sites. Using decoy data, they identified nesting hotspots previously unknown to science. In one area, they discovered over 30 egg clutches neatly laid beneath thorny shrubs. "Without roborabbits, we'd never have tracked these patterns," Nguyen explained. By destroying those nests before hatchlings emerged, he estimated python numbers could plummet by an additional 40% within 2 seasons. His team logged every clutch in a geotag database, allowing rangers to perform targeted nest mitigation rather than blanket culling. However, not all outcomes were benign. In Collier County, fishermen reported an uptick in alligator encounters near decoy stations. At one lock, an adult alligator over 6 feet long was found wrapped around a robo-rabbit, scraping off its fiberglass ears like a gnawed trophy. Park staff suspect the scent diffuser also mimicked rodent odors, luring opportunistic gators. Engineers responded by issuing a software patch. Decoys now broadcast a low-frequency humming designed to deter reptiles while remaining attractive to cold-blooded pythons. Preliminary tests indicated the gator snares dropped by 80%, although experts cautioned continuous monitoring to avoid chasing one predatory imbalance with another. Economic variables also factored in. Local ecotourism guides in Everglades City worried that the clatter of solar panels and periodic beeps might spook wildlife viewing tours. In response, the FWC designated silent zones where decoys shut down audible signals, relying solely on infrared motion. Guides reported that bird life resumed pre-robo-rabbit levels, and manatee sightings near freshwater inlets remained stable. Tourism boards quickly updated promotional materials, touting Florida as leading the world in high-tech conservation. By late summer, the Everglades Robotic Rabbit program had captured over 1,200 pythons and prevented more than 400 potential hatchings. Preliminary ecosystem surveys registered a 25% uptick in marsh rabbit populations and a modest rebound in ground nesting wading birds. Biologists celebrated these metrics as signs that the balance might finally be shifting. Yet as the rainy season approached, engineers braced for flooded circuits and tangled underbrush. They prepared amphibious upgrades for the decoys' motor housings and tested biodegradable foam floats that would keep devices surface level during deep inundations. Across the swamp, park rangers exchanged wry jokes. Who would have thought plastic bunnies could be this deadly? Yet beneath the humor lay cautious optimism. The robotic rabbits had emerged as a powerful tool in an otherwise losing battle, a case study in how technology, guided by ecological science and adaptive management, could wrest control from a species that once seemed unstoppable. As Florida prepared for year 2 of deployment, one question remained. Would the robo-rabbit revolution prove sustainable long-term, or would pythons simply learn to ignore the next generation of high-tech decoys? As the rainy season pressed on, the robotic rabbits faced their toughest trial yet. Torrents of water turned sawgrass into navigable rivers and revealed a harsh truth. Dozens of decoys shorted out as floodwaters breached aging circuit seals. Field engineers raced to retrofit amphibious floats, slip-on foam collars, and watertight enclosures, and within a fortnight, float-on models resumed patrol. Yet the floods exposed snake cunning. Ranger Elena Morales discovered one decoy snagged 3 miles downstream. Its heat coils scratched and cracked, as though a python had ambushed it en route to safety. That ambush spurred herpetologists to install microcameras on select bunnies, revealing juvenile pythons testing multiple decoys before coiling around the one with the strongest scent pulse. They're showing spatial memory and social learning, Dr. Maria Patel noted. Hatchlings born near decoy zones began avoiding artificial heat signatures entirely, an evolutionary arms race. Engineers responded with randomized movement patterns and variable pheromone bursts, but the battle between adaptation and evasion had clearly escalated. Worse, authorities uncovered an illegal python trafficking ring when decoy GPS logs revealed unauthorized overrides directing units into concealed nets. Deputies raided a clandestine python ranch in Collier County, seizing 40 constrictors fattened by hacked robo-rabbits. The traffickers planned to export them as exotic pets, but law enforcement recovered the devices and deployed a firmware kill switch to lock out future tampering. Meanwhile, unintended wildlife encounters proliferated. Wood storks and herons, drawn to the decoy's beeps and infrared flares, occasionally fluttered into python snares, forcing rangers to switch to silent, infrared-only luring modes and restrict deployments during bird breeding seasons. A newly formed interagency oversight committee mandated monthly audits to balance predator control with ecosystem protection. Innovation spread as engineers unveiled amphibious robo-armadillos built to trap feral hogs and raccoons. Field trials in Sewanee swamps netted 5 hogs and 3 raccoons in a week. Drone-launched capture nets, skyhound units, even cornered a 14-foot python mid-swamp, marking the first successful aerial capture. Buoyed by mixed results, legislators approved an extra $10 million, $15 million total, for the program, contingent on strict protocols. Decoys no closer than 2 miles apart, full deactivation during key breeding windows, and a public performance dashboard. But as new, more adaptable decoys entered final testing, rumors surfaced of a near 20-foot Goliath python that had evaded every trap, robot, and drone. The Everglades held its breath. When science and nature collide on this scale, who, or what, will outsmart whom? By spring, the Florida legislature had greenlit a full-scale rollout, funneling $8 million into an expanded robo-rabbit fleet. Park biologists and engineers converged at the newly christened Warren Command Center, a repurposed sugar mill overlooking Shark River Slough. Rows of charging stations hummed under solar canopies as technicians calibrated heat outputs, motion patterns, and sent frequencies for 1,200 new decoys. Each unit now boasted amphibious wheels designed to handle seasonal flooding and telescoping legs that adjusted height to mimic real rabbit movements. Deployments targeted 3 critical zones: Fakahatchee Strand, Big Cypress, and Everglades National Park's marsh edge corridors. Rangers soon witnessed capture rates skyrocket. In one fortnight alone, 68 pythons, ranging from 8 to 16 feet, moved inexorably toward decoys and into hidden nets. Dr. Marisol Vega, the lead herpetologist, noted a 45% decline in juvenile snake sightings compared to the previous year. "We're intercepting breeding-age females before they lay," she explained, eyes bright with cautious optimism. "This is a game-changer for population control." Meanwhile, field reports confirmed a tentative rebound of marsh rabbits. Tracks proliferated on sensor cameras, and ground nesting rails returned to drained foraging flats. But success came tangled with new challenges. At a US 41 canal lock, an alligator nearly shredded a decoy, mistaking its infrared signature for an easy meal. Nearby, a curious bobcat in Collier County walked into a motion-triggered net, forcing rangers to refine trigger thresholds and install quick-release clips for non-target wildlife. Park Superintendent Miguel Santos recalled, "We had to strike a balance between drawing only pythons and safeguarding every other species that calls the glades home." Software patches introduced reptile-specific vibration frequencies and reduced scent emissions during dawn and dusk when raccoons and otters feed. Engineering teams also confronted sabotage. Late one night, a GPS ping revealed a decoy drifting into private property along the Tamimi Trail. Investigators uncovered an illicit python farming ring. Traffickers had overridden guidance codes, guiding decoys to farmed python pens. Law enforcement dismantled the operation, seizing both snakes and hacked robots. In response, developers rolled out encrypted firmware and geofencing software, ensuring decoys automatically shut down if removed beyond park boundaries. Cost-benefit debates surged at monthly commission meetings. Opponents questioned the $6,500 to $7,000 per unit price tag and annual maintenance costs, estimating $10 million a year to sustain the program. Conservationists countered with economic valuations. Each rescued native rabbit could seed tourism, hunting, and ecosystem services worth tens of thousands. The compromise plan instituted a sliding scale model. High-density zones retained active decoys year-round, while buffer zones rotated units seasonally, reducing idle time and maintenance overhead. Across the swamp, ecotourism operators adapted. Airboat captains began offering robo-rabbit safaris, equipping passengers with night vision binoculars to witness python traps in action. Bird-watching tours marked decoy-free corridors, ensuring wader and heron populations remained undisturbed. Local businesses sold miniature robo-rabbit figurines and enamel pins labeled Everglades Defender, proceeds funding further technological research. Meanwhile, rival innovation sprouted. At the University of Florida, students unveiled a prototype snake evader drone swarm equipped with infrared disruptors, designed to herd pythons toward decoys. In Miami, a startup tested bioacoustic lures broadcasting low-frequency rodent distress calls, another complementary tool. The Everglades model was evolving into a modular anti-python toolkit, blending robotics, acoustics, and AI mapping. Yet the ultimate test loomed: adaptation. Early indicators suggested pythons were learning to avoid individual decoys or coiling around multiple robots to disable sensors before slithering away. Dr. Vega warned, "We're witnessing a rudimentary form of conditioned avoidance. Unless we constantly vary decoy signatures, heat, motion, scent, we risk triggering an arms race that only the snakes can win." Engineers responded by implementing randomized parameter shifts every 24 hours, but admitted the tactic required perpetual innovation as summer solstice neared. A looming question hung over the Everglades. Could this high-tech warren of robotic prey outlast the cunning of an apex invader? Early results offered hope, but the path forward demanded vigilance, cross-disciplinary collaboration, and a willingness to recalibrate at the speed of wildlife adaptation. In the silent marshes, where moonlight glints off sawgrass and hidden killers coil beneath the water's surface, one truth endured: In this battle for ecological balance, technology must evolve faster than the python's next move. By early September, after nearly a full year of relentless deployment, the robotic rabbit program had scored undeniable victories, but also revealed hard lessons. Pythons in hot zones began showing signs of learned aversion. Some snakes paused before engaging decoys, while others coiled around multiple units to break limb actuators and disable heat emitters. Engineers responded by rolling out Phase 3 firmware that randomized heat pulses in unpredictable intervals and introduced soft, biodegradable fur coverings scented with variable rabbit pheromone blends. Trials of these upgraded decoys yielded a spike in first contact captures. 210 pythons netted in just 4 weeks across Fakahatchee and Big Cypress, a 20% increase over the previous period. Yet the snake's evolving tactics, testing decoy integrity, coordinating group foraging at dawn, underscored that any static lure risked eventual obsolescence. Meanwhile, operational challenges mounted. Tropical storms battered marshlands, flooding control stations, and washing decoys deep into submerged thickets. One rogue unit, swept miles downstream by hurricane surge, was recovered months later. Its GPS antenna snapped, heat coils fused, and motion sensors coated in silt. Field teams instituted new storm-proofing protocols, decoy evacuation triggers that sent units into waterproof hibernation mode when wind gusts exceeded 40 miles per hour, and high-visibility buoy markers to prevent permanent loss. A specialized rescue raft drone system was also deployed to retrieve stranded decoys in flood zones, cutting replacement costs by an estimated 30%. On the funding front, Florida's Department of Environmental Protection approved an additional $4.2 million under a performance-based contract, contingent on achieving a 50% reduction in breeding-age female pythons by the next dry season. Concurrently, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service awarded a $2 million federal grant to expand decoy trials into the southern reaches of Everglades National Park and estuarine mangrove buffers. These funds underwrote the training of new decoy technicians and the launch of a mobile app called Python Patrol, which allowed citizen scientists to report decoy sightings, python tracks, and even suspicious activity suggesting trap tampering. Within its first month, Python Patrol recorded over 5,000 entries, turning recreational hikers and guided tour operators into active partners in invasive species management. Beyond Florida, international interest surged. Delegations from Australia's Queensland government visited the warren to study technology adaptation for controlling cane toads and feral pigs. Costa Rican conservationists eyed robo-rabbits as potential solutions for invasive boas threatening native tree frogs. Tech startups pitched modular decoy platforms for different ecosystems. Heat-generating lizards to lure monitor predators in Kenya, scent-based rodents to corral invasive mongooses in Guam. The Everglades experiment had become a global blueprint for deploying soft robotics in wildlife management, attracting venture capital and sparking collaboration between universities, NGOs, and private sector partners. Public reaction remained mixed. While tourism boards touted the program as a cutting-edge conservation success, some grassroots environmentalists pushed back, concerned about technological spillover. A viral video showed a family of otters curiously tugging at a decoy's whiskers, inadvertently tripping a snare meant for pythons. In response, the FWC introduced Target Lock software that required dual confirmation of a 15-second continuous heat signature and species-specific movement pattern before triggering nets. Additional ethical guidelines were drafted, mandating quarterly ecological impact assessments to ensure non-target species, raccoons, possums, foxes, were not unintentionally endangered. Economic analysts praised the program's long-term cost savings. By diverting a portion of tourism tax revenues into the Wildlife Technology Fund, Florida projected that recovering native game species, rabbits, raccoon, deer, would bolster hunting and wildlife viewing industries by an estimated $12 million annually. Local eco-entrepreneurs began offering robo-rabbit integration tours, complete with behind-the-scenes visits to the warren and demonstrations of decoy assembly. Merchandise lines expanded to include miniature working models and DIY kits for educational use in classrooms. raising both awareness and supplemental funding for research. As the dry season approached, the program entered its most critical phase, targeting remnant breeding pockets that had thus far eluded removal. Hybrid tactics, combining drone surveillance, decoy networks, and pheromone trail sensors, were scheduled for deployment. Dr. Marisol Vega emphasized that sustained success would depend on perpetual innovation and community engagement. Pythons adapt. We adapt faster. But human vigilance remains our greatest asset. Field teams prepared for early morning decoy sweeps in pre-dawn darkness, rangers carrying backup manual snares in case of unexpected mechanical failures. The stakes were clear. Failure to collapse the python population below reproductive thresholds could allow survivors to rebound and reassert dominance. With cumulative captures surpassing 5,500 pythons and hundreds of nests destroyed, the Roborabbit campaign had already reshaped the Everglades landscape. Yet every victory carried the reminder that technology alone could not finish the job. The partnership of science, policy, and public participation would decide whether Florida's bold experiment remained a fleeting triumph or matured into a lasting defense of its fragile wilderness. As field technicians remotely rebooted the decoy fleet under a blazing sun, one thought echoed across the swamp. In this high-stakes chess match between human ingenuity and reptilian resilience, the next move would determine the fate of an entire ecosystem. In the months following the phased rollout, the Everglades Robotic Rabbit program reached a critical juncture, collapsing isolated python populations below reproduction thresholds and preventing a rebound. With more than 6,200 adult pythons removed and nest counts down by an estimated 65%, state biologists declared a temporary victory. Yet the program's architects knew that pythons' remarkable adaptability could turn the tide again. As winter's mild temperatures settled over the sawgrass, engineers and herpetologists launched Project Quantum Warren, a far-reaching upgrade to decoy intelligence, community engagement, and ecological monitoring that would determine whether Florida's high-tech gambit could outpace nature's resilience. The Warren Command Center data scientists analyzed millions of movement records, behavioral logs, and capture sequences to teach decoys advanced pattern recognition. Using machine learning algorithms, robotic rabbits now randomized their infrared signatures, movement patterns, and pheromone profiles in real time, thwarting snakes that had begun to recognize static lures. Cloud-connected sensory arrays allowed units to share localized avoidance alerts. Once a python disengaged from a decoy, that intelligence broadcast to neighboring decoys, prompting them to instantly self-modify their heat frequencies or relocate autonomously. This collective learning network represented the first documented instance of distributed robotic adaptation in a natural environment, and it blurred the line between conservation tool and biological mimic. Concurrently, the FWC and university partners launched the Citizen Python Defense Network, integrating recreational anglers, eco-tour guides, and amateur wildlife photographers into the program. Through the Python Patrol app, over 15,000 registered users contributed geotagged photos of decoy locations, python tracks, and even audio clips of suspicious rustling. Hackathons organized by tech sponsors empowered citizen scientists to develop mini-apps for real-time data visualization, automated threat alerts, and educational modules for school children. In dozens of Florida communities, local Roborabbit ambassadors held workshops demonstrating how the technology worked and how residents could aid efforts by reporting sightings, monitoring nests, and organizing habitat restoration days to bolster native prey species on the ground. Rangers deployed smart caravans, off-road vehicles outfitted with mobile charging docks, rapid repair 3D printers for field fabricating decoy components, and miniature labs for on-site pheromone analysis. These units could service dozens of decoys in a single run, replacing damaged parts within minutes and restoring functionality even in flooded marshlands. The introduction of biodegradable, self-repairing polymers in rabbit exteriors further reduced maintenance costs and environmental footprint. Field teams reported a 40% drop in device loss due to storm surges, theft, or wildlife interference, and the operational tempo shifted from reactive repair to proactive redeployment, keeping decoy coverage nearly continuous. International observers took note. Australian delegations studied quantum-enhanced decoys to control invasive cane toads, while Caribbean conservationists tested tropical adaptations for trapping invasive iguanas and mongooses. Kenya's rangeland managers eyed robo-horse prototypes to corral feral camels, and South American ranchers experimented with decoy vocals to herd puma predators away from livestock. The Everglades model became a global demonstration of how robotics, ecological science, and crowdsourced data could converge to manage invasive species, transforming once theoretical solutions into operational reality. Even as successes mounted, ethical debates intensified. Animal welfare groups raised concerns over the decoy's ability to draw non-target species into capture nets, urging more stringent species classification protocols. Environmental ethicists questioned whether deploying synthetic stimuli across an entire ecosystem risked altering natural behaviors in subtle, unpredictable ways. To address these concerns, advisory boards instituted annual ecosystem integrity audits, commissioning independent ecologists to assess impacts on non-target populations, pollinator activity, and soil invertebrate communities. Preliminary audit results indicated negligible long-term effects on native species beyond intended controls, but the oversight structure served as a model for responsible technology deployment and conservation. By the end of the first quantum cycle, python capture rates rose by another 30%, juvenile sightings plummeted, and over 30 key nesting sites were abetted. Meanwhile, marsh rabbit populations doubled in select treatment zones, ground nesting wading bird counts returned to 5-year highs, and small mammal diversity surveys registered the reentry of species once extirpated from the region. The program's cumulative removal of nearly 7,500 pythons and destruction of over 1,200 nests had shifted the predator-prey dynamic decisively in favor of native fauna. As the Everglades prepared for the next dry season, one realization stood clear. The battle for ecological balance was not a single technological fix, but a dynamic interplay of innovation, human collaboration, and adaptive management. The robotic rabbits had outsmarted pythons at every turn, but only because engineers, scientists, policymakers, and citizens refused to stand still. In a testament to both human ingenuity and nature's tenacity, Florida's robotic warren had transformed from a daring experiment into a living system that learned, evolved, and thrived. What began as an insane bid to lure giant snakes with plastic hairs had blossomed into a paradigm shift in conservation. Proof that when technology and community unite, even the most daunting ecological challenges can face the unimaginable.